Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich. Today's video is a Ramble Rich video. If you've watched my previous one, you will know that this is one of my currently 3 video series. I have Fun Fights, where I show you and break down monster design or encounter design and try and make encounters more exciting. Then, of course, I have what I would call almost the bread and butter of my videos, which is my reviews, where I do just that. I review various D&D products, usually in PDF format, and that is where I've been getting most of my attention and most of my views. My third series is this Ramble Rich thing. This is the most sort of talking head, me just letting some ideas and some thoughts, kind of just putting my mind on screen and rambling with you for a little bit. I'll try and keep these the shortest, as they could also be the ones that go on the most tangents. But otherwise, this is just one of those videos, Ramble Rich, where I'm just going to kind of chat with you about something that I was thinking of late last night, early this morning. So, Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 3. Big battle, right? This video is, while it is Ramble Rich, so it is sort of more of my mind just going wherever it goes and trying to contain it a little bit, which is something I can do in the format you're watching now because it's now been edited. I still want to try and find some direction, somewhere to narrow down my focus and my thoughts. What you're going to see here on the background is just some gameplay of me playing Guild Wars 2. It's a game I love. It has no relevance. There is no significance to what you're seeing on screen and what I am saying and what's happening here in my little box. The gameplay of Guild Wars 2 is just simply to give you something visual to stare at so you don't have to stare at my ugly mug while I chat with you. So, Game of Thrones. When I was watching it, a wonderful episode. You've got awesome fights and, there's undead giants and dragons are fighting against dragons. And, it's just larger than life, massive, epic scale battle and, hundreds of thousands. Reminds me of Helm's Deep type of stuff, right? The bad guys are storming the fortress and the good guys are slowly retreating and being pulled back and being more and more confined. And they're protecting those that are sort of, really, if you think about it, it had a very Helm's Deep, Two Towers, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings feel. Now, what's the point in talking about that? Watching it, I'm always inspired. Whether it's a book that you read, a video game I play, Game of Thrones, of course, larger than life, someone else's vision in a fantasy element, right? There was magic involved. There was swords, there was zombies and undead and swarms, that sort of feeling. So it's very D&D-esque, of course. There's 2 dragons fighting each other in the air, and you know what I mean? So there's a giant. There's all sorts of stuff. Where I'd like to sort of channel this video a little bit is more for the new DMs or perhaps the less experienced DMs. Be careful with your inspiration and don't try and recreate something so large and so grand. For new DMs or inexperienced DMs, perhaps you're just journeying into, you've been playing for a while, but you're just journeying into the dungeon master space. Inspiration is a wonderful thing. It gets you excited. It's really, especially as a brand new DM, it's all you have to pull from is, I was always into, and when I say I, not me specifically, but you as the DM might be saying, well, I was always into Dune, or I was always into Star Wars, and I really want to create this epic sword fight scene, lightsaber battles, right? I want this larger-than-life Lord of the Rings-esque, I love Tolkien, I've read it, I've digested every aspect of it, I want to create my own world with my own languages, and, there's a lot that you can pull from. You don't have the gameplay, the minutia of what's happened in the module and the way things flow at the game table. What you have is just this over-the-top Pacific Rim, larger-than-life Godzilla-esque inspiration. The problem with that is it can be very unwieldy to bring that to the table, but most importantly, and this is where sort of that Game of Thrones inspiration and reference, the catalyst for this video comes in. It's going to be so difficult to live up to that. If your players have seen that episode, okay, most of your players, most of those that are in the what they call geek nerd culture, we've seen and we know all of this stuff. We know Patrick Rothfuss and Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and Marvel, and you know what I mean? We've read the comic books. We've played all those Blizzard, Bethesda, Skyrim, Fallout video game. We've done all of that stuff. That's what we're into. You are going to have a hard time as a dungeon master creating something of that level, that epic nature. So you have to start smaller. Use these things as inspiration to get you excited to buy the books and get down to the table, but pull away from what we saw on film. You know, it was often talked about when Peter Jackson was doing Lord of the Rings, how, I mean, why was it that Lord of the Rings, what was it, Fellowship was somewhere early 2000, I think? It was 50 years that Tolkien's work was finally put onto screen. I know there was a Lord of the Rings cartoon and whatnot, but in the grand epic nature that Peter Jackson did, it was often considered an unfilmable book. I think it was done right in that Peter Jackson definitely spread it out. You know, there's no way you're going to film that in 2-3 hours. You know, if you look at the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy, based on Peter Jackson's at least, you're looking at, if you look at extended editions, you got 11-12 hours of movie there. So it was often thought to be unfilmable because there's just so much there. So that's the first sort of, if I was to offer you a lesson, you don't have to encompass everything that's inspired you and put it all into one session. You know, they often say in the art and game design world, it's not what you put into the game, it's what you leave out that determines whether IGN's going to give that a perfect 10 or rate it a 7.5. So yes, you might be excited. You might be truly enjoying everything. If you're an artist, you might be inspired by a rhino and armor and rockets and, you know what I mean? But you don't need to draw a concept art piece for some sci-fi, cyberpunky, whatever, steampunk rhino dinosaurus type of thing and create a rhino with armor and rocket. But it doesn't all need to go in. Peter Jackson's vision, that's his world. That's how he saw it. Yes, he did stay true and respectful to the source material. You always want to. But that's still his vision. It's often why I'm reluctant to run sessions or use Middle Earth as the background for my setting. I know they're out there. I've seen it since back in the Pathfinder time, so maybe 3.5. And I think there is a current 5th edition version, you know, or conversion of Middle Earth. I can never live up to the story that my players at the table have when they think Middle Earth. No matter what map I create, it's never going to have that nostalgia, that iconic feel. No matter what my storyline is, unless I decide to go down the direction of the One Ring and Sauron and all that stuff, it's just never going to do justice because we've seen the highest levels of CGI and monster creation and the beauty and artistry of Weta Digital and their, you know, sword making, their prosthetics, just the nuances. And then also beyond that, you've got much bigger geeks that know a lot more about Lord of the Rings than I do, that already put their vision out there. So just as with Game of Thrones, and as I said, where that was the sort of inspiration, don't sit there and say, oh, I need to now create an epic battle similar to what happened in episode 3 of season 8. You know, when the White Walkers finally made their way to Winterfell. That needs to be in my game because what I saw, it was very Dungeons and Dragons-esque. There were dragons fighting in the sky, like I said, right? Everything. The Night King and magic and, you know, undead and a necromantic thing. And then there's sword fights and then their swords were on fire and there was a Lady of Fire. It's Dungeons and Dragons, right? It's fantasy. But you don't then need to say, because that was so exciting and what that felt and the emotion and, you know, Arya saving the day and all this other stuff, you don't need to then say, okay, my rogue is going to be like Arya and then there's going to be this cool warped white tree of the old gods and then Bran, you know, the guy who's using Find Familiar. You see where I'm going is there's a lot of parallels in relationship from what we saw or what was seen in Lord of the Rings, or I'm sorry, in Game of Thrones, but that can be a lot to bring to your table. And for the new or inexperienced DM, I dare say that you should go almost the complete opposite of that. So go off your own path, on your own path, go your own direction, go elsewhere with your storyline and your content, and maybe slowly kind of trickle in some of those larger than life moments that we've seen in Gladiator and Braveheart and Lord of the Rings and Two Towers and, you know, whatever, right? You know, different cartoons and Marvel and, you know, how do you follow up with Avengers Endgame or this or that? I mean, it's too much to put into the table space. So create your own stories, be inspired, but keep it small, keep it simple, and then let it branch out from there and allow it the freedom to take a life of its own. So that's all I've got for you guys today. I'll see you guys later. Take care.